Hi and welcome to The Inquisitive Artist, where I, Lindsay Tyson, dive deep into the lives, art and creative processes of fellow artists. I'm fascinated by how others approach their work, their unique perspectives and the ways they navigate life. Join me as I explore candid conversations with artists and creatives from all walks of life. Together, we'll discuss the challenges of the creative journey and share insights to encourage your own artistic path. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to part 2 of this 3-part episode of The Inquisitive Artist, where I have the pleasure of speaking with artist Kane Cunningham. Kane is a landscape artist whose thought-provoking creations explore the environment, impermanence and human connection to place. Throughout this series, Kane shares insights into his artistic journey, his inspirations and the stories behind his work. We also delve into the infamous house project. Whether you're an art enthusiast or just curious about the creative process, this conversation offers a fascinating glimpse into the mind of an artist who challenges us to see the world in new ways. I hope you enjoy this in-depth exploration with Kane Cunningham.
And then decide what I'm going to do, and then start really, and then I say, and I'll move the canvas away from it, and I'll just look at it as a painting, not a view.
And then just paint from
memory.
Really.
And essentially, what I'm painting is memory. It's a Chinese way of painting. Is that Chinese landscape painters don't paint in the landscape. They experience the landscape and then they paint in the studio. That of their feelings and emotions of that, and that memory, and that's what I do. That I'm painting about memory, and then I'm thinking about, there's lots of politics in my history related to what I'm looking at, but I'm not thinking about climate change then, and I'm not thinking about history or painters or that I admire. I'm thinking about how the hell do I get this painting resolved?
Yeah.
Which
is quite hard in watercolour, isn't it? Once you've got a mark.
Yeah, and quite often I'll be throwing buckets of water at it to get rid of it, and that's the only way you can get it, or a squeegee, and just get rid of the paint and then start again. But the beauty about working in the landscape is that it dries fairly quickly. I did see a lovely image. There's a gallery in the Grasmere called the Heaton Cooper Gallery, and the Heaton Cooper family are a clan really, the dynasty in the Lake District. And I think it was Alfred Cooper. He'd got one of his watercolours, and he got some old newspapers in this crag, and he set a fire going, and he was drying the watercolour. Imagine doing that now in the Lake District. You get shot, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
What's that fire? Oh,
yeah.
It's an artist drying his painting. But the reality is it dries fairly quickly.
What about colours then? Do you actually use the colours that you're looking at, or do you just
bit of both,
put
really.
everything?
Bit of both. So if it's a purple landscape, it's heather, then purple's going to go into it. If it's a green landscape, green's going to go into it.
But if I was looking at one of your paintings and looking at the scene, it wouldn't necessarily be.
No, the topography would be the same. You'd recognise it, but in terms of the colour, no, it's what I want to put in on the day. And that's what artists do.
And do you think a lot about, consciously about tonal values, or does it just come out naturally?
I think of the way it works is that I'm inspired by the landscape.
Yeah.
I'm inspired by the location. I'm inspired by, my understanding of that landscape. Then I'll do a drawing, and then I'll think about the colours, and then I'll think about where the light's coming from, and that's about as much as I think of. Okay. So I'll think about where the light's coming from the left or from the right, and then that'll determine the rest of the painting.
I always forget that little detail. That's one of my faults.
I
always forget
if the light's coming from the left, everything on the right is going to be in shadow or underneath. You know what I mean? So it's going to that's to that kind of modelling of the picture that I'll be thinking about. And a lot of scraping, a lot of kicking, a lot of frustration, but if you get it right, watercolour is an amazing medium.
But you work on a very large scale a lot of the time. Is that always, or do you...
No, not always. No, not always.
So I think you were telling me once. I can't remember exactly, but when you go out, you've got a special rig for really big.
I've got a big. My joiner at college made it for me. It's great. It's you should patent it. It's a fantastic easel. Yeah. I can kick it and it opens up. It's like these prams. You see mothers getting prams out, kicking it. All of a sudden, it's a 4-wheeler pram. How did that happen? Wow. It's a bit like that. I just kick it and it opens. And
how big is it?
I can get a 5 foot, 6 foot canvas on it. It's great.
And do you use canvas, or do you use big watercolour sheets?
Big
Or
watercolour sheets, yeah.
Right.
I get my watercolour sheets from John Purcell's in London.
Oh,
and so they're about 50 quid a sheet.
And how heavy is the paper?
Very, about 600 gram
Yeah.
probably. So you could throw a bucket of water at it in one bucket.
Yeah.
So
and do you tape it onto the
No, I
on
just
the board?
got bulldog clips.
Okay, and you got a big board?
Big boards, yeah. So it's very much, I get the heaviest paper I can get. So if I can throw a bucket of water at it, it won't buckle. I never buy cheap paper, and I never stretch paper because it's a pain in the
right,
ass.
okay, yeah. And I was going to ask you about sketchbook. Do you ever work in a sketchbook?
No, and I'll tell you why. Because when I was teaching, I didn't have the time. I always felt it was a waste of time working in sketchbooks when I could be doing a painting. Right. I could spend 2 days working in sketchbooks, but then what are you going to do with them?
Yeah.
You know, unless you're going to work in a different way. Whereas if I'd work it straight onto a big piece of paper, I might get something at the end of it which I could exhibit. But sketchbooks, no. I have friends who just work all the time in sketchbook, but I think it's a waste of energy.
I like experimenting in sketchbook. I would never.
I'd rather experiment on the paper.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. What I do is no painting is the same. I take what I learn from one painting into the next. So every painting is a kind of development of the previous work. And I never work in sketchbooks. I draw, I doodle, and I research a lot in sketchbooks. That's how I use my sketchbooks. So I'm constantly researching, writing, thinking, writing about the place that I'm going to be visiting. So there's lots of annotation in my sketchbooks, never any drawings.
So you're just really wanting to capture the essence of that place. Yeah. And okay, so do you go out early in the morning and then you're there all day? How does that work?
Earlier the better, because then I get a parking space. Seriously, earlier the better. If you get there before everybody else. Yeah. And this one, I was thinking about this one in Buttermere that I was painting, and I got there very early because there's one on Buttermere. There's only 1 or 2 places you can park, and if you don't get there, you're buggered. You just got to go somewhere else. So I got there about 7 o'clock. Great, I mean, relief. You know, you're driving down Honester Pass, and you're driving through. Oh, great, there's nobody there. Oh, I've got it. I've parked myself. I'm here for the day. Yeah. And I remember setting up, and I just started, underpainting, really. And this runner would run past. And I kind of almost like apologetically said to her, well, I've only just started. He said, I'd leave it if I was you. It looks all right to me. And then she ran off. And then I heard this burp behind me. And I turned round. And there's a bloke standing there, pissed. And it's like 8:30, 7 in the morning.
Oh, really? Oh, my God.
Hello. He said, he's holding two glasses. He said, would you like a glass of wine? In the middle of nowhere. He said, I've got a bottle of wine just cooling in the lake, he said. I said, where do you come from? He said, I was camping over there, he said. And he was a very posh guy. I was camping over there. He said, I thought you might like a drink. So I was going to see what you were doing. He said, wow.
Well, Prince Charles.
It wasn't probably on the land. And I'm going, hello. And I wasn't going to be rude, but I was like just about to kind of burst onto this painting. And so I often wonder where he was or where he went to or what it was. But it was just joining a landscape like me. He was just camping there, but getting pissed at the same time. Which is great.
What a life!
What a life!
Sounds great. So you mentioned Turner and Graham Sutherland.
Yeah, but remember Turner never used to paint in the landscape. He always did something called colour beginnings. He always used to colour studies, and he used to draw in landscape. Right. He's a great businessman, so he would never paint unless somebody had commissioned him.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So he'd do all of these drawings, and he'd go to his London studio, and he'd 50 drawings or whatever. And somebody, oh, Mr. Turner, I'd love that one. Oh, yes, I'll have it knocked off by this afternoon.
Seriously?
Yeah. He was a consummate businessman. Wow. Yeah. So he would never paint because he didn't know if he could sell it. So he only paints as he could sell. And of course, he used to dip his big sheets of paper in buckets of colour as well. And then let it draw, be a yellow or a blue or something.
Gosh,
great, love his work. Can I come back to this one? But the landscapes he painted, if you were to stand in any location that Turner had painted, it looks nothing like a Turner painting. He would invent and create, because of the Napoleonic Wars, he couldn't go to Europe. And the Europe is the Alps. It's it's grand scale. So what he probably did, he thought, well, look, these mountains aren't that big, are they? He said, well, I'll make them a little bit bigger. I'll make them really big, so that person in the landscape feels a bit kind of enclosed, and it's this kind of the fear of this idea of the sublime, of this fear of the landscape. So I'm sure there was part of his planning is to make the mountains that much bigger. And of course, in those days, there wasn't photography. So if you're in London, the only view you would have of the Lake District would be of somebody's painting. And of course, in those days, they had like Dr. Monroe and his team of painters would be knocking off paintings of the Lake District based upon one person's painting,
Right.
and they'd be selling them for the market.
Gosh.
Yeah, it's business. They were knocking them out in those days.
The sea. So, I mean,
Yeah.
obviously Turner painted
Yeah.
the sea
Yeah.
quite a lot, didn't he? Do you ever paint the sea?
I used to paint the sea when I was a student. I used to come from when I was a student at Leeds and come to Scarborough, and I used to do a lot of sea paintings. But I think the answer to that is no. I like form, I like structure, I like this idea of the sublime, of being in the mountains and being terrified by the mountains. I love that idea. So the sea for me is it's a difficult subject to paint unless it's a storm, you know. But I prefer structure, and that's why I've just come back from the Lake District, where the beauty about the Lake District now is that you see structure, because all the leaves have gone. You see the branches, you see the rocks, you see the mountains, you can see through the forest, you can see everything. So it's a completely different experience. Whereas in the summer, the foliage just blocks everything off.
I must admit, I find it hard to be inspired in the summer. I really like
the
weather and the energy and the wind and the rain.
all of that, you know.
And do you actually go out in all weathers?
All weathers.
Because it reminds me of Joan Eardley. I remember seeing a photo of her in the snow and the rain.
I saw a show of hers last year, actually, up in where was it? In Kirkcudbright. I was coming back from Ireland. I've been working over there, and I just love her work.
Yeah,
and there's another
amazing
exhibition coming up as well, by a female painter called Sheila Fell. She's an amazing landscape painter. She uses really dirty, oily, rugged. There's a physicality about her work which I really like. Lowry loved her work. Yeah, I think Lowry used to buy some of her paintings as well. And there's another guy up there who was a postman, who was a transvestite postman called Percy Kelly. So Percy Kelly and Sheila Fell are two of my favourite Lake District painters. Oh, of course, Turner.
Right.
And
so,
the Cooper.
So you go out in your van.
Yeah.
And then do you actually go out like for a week and sleep in it and do, or do you go somewhere every night? Or
well, it depends. If I'm with my wife, we'll do 2 days in the camper van, 2 nights in a hotel.
And what does she do while you're painting?
She's reading.
Right. Okay.
Or sketching or doing something.
Oh right, so she sketches a little bit and stuff as well. Yeah. Is she artistic?
Yeah, very artistic. Yeah. But if I'm by myself, I'll just. I mean, like last week, I stayed in a youth hostel because I really like youth hostels. You know, as a kid, I used to go to a youth hostel, and it's cheap as well. You meet all sorts of interesting people.
At least it's warm.
It's warm. The one in Borrowdale, it's great because there's a log fire and a bar. What more do you want? You know, like 20 quid a night. You know.
Yeah.
But in the summer, I'll use the camper van because I can spend more time outside.
And are you going out? Because you're saying Turner was a businessman and he's painting to order, basically.
Yeah,
but do you do that, or do you just go out and paint? And
never. I did one commission, and then the lady said to me, "It's the wrong kind of blue." I said, "Pardon? It's the wrong kind of blue." Clearly, she wanted it for the curtains, to match the curtains, and I've never done that since. I don't mind people come into the studio with a swatch of curtains, saying, "I want to match a painting to fit that," which might have happened to you, you know. But I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it because then you just. Because there's what I do is a lot of risk in everything I do. Whereas at some painters you can just, I'm going to paint a photograph, and there's no risk in that. You know what they're doing, but there's risk in everything that I do, and it could fail at any point. So if I'm painting a picture for somebody, I'm thinking, I might not take that risk, and if I do not take that risk, it won't be the work I want it to be.
It won't have the energy in it.
It won't have the energy in it. It won't be inspired. So I paint now what I paint, and if people like it, they like it, and if they want to match it with the curtains, fine.
And is it quite a quick process for you? Is it long? So would you go out and paint 5 paintings in one day?
No, it'd be one a day.
One a day, one big one a day.
Yeah, but I have on some occasions painted for 5 or 6 hours, and it's been a disaster. And then I've taken all that knowledge into a painting that's took me about 2 minutes, and it's been the best painting. But all of that knowledge has gone into that painting. Yeah. So.
Sometimes things flow, don't they?
Yeah. And particularly with watercolour, if you get it wrong at any stage, you're buggered.
I used to love watercolour. When I first started painting, I used watercolour because I don't like the controlled watercolour. I like to be able to see what happens and when you add water to it and where it goes and stuff like that. So I also read somewhere, it says, Kane Cunningham is a highly skilled artist who specialises in Northern Expressionism. Yeah. Is that a term you've coined?
No, I've invented that.
You did?
I've invented that. It's a bit of blag. It's a bit of blag.
I thought you might have, but I didn't know if it was something I missed.
No, it's a bit of blag which I'm trying to get a head of steam up. The thing is, I think the reason why I've said that is that there isn't a clearly identifiable genre or style of painting which is northern, that we can say we're part of that group. And northern expressionism can mean a lot of things to a lot of people, but essentially it's maybe inspired by the landscape, but it's about an expression of the landscape, an expression of how you feel. And in practice, you're based in the north. Yeah. So if I lived in Cornwall, it was southern expressionism, I guess. Yeah. But it's northern.
I quite like it.
It kind of feels a bit more kind of gritty. So really, it's a term I've come up with to identify anybody that kind of responds to the landscape and is an expressionist person.
I think maybe I could be
I think you're a northern expressionist, without a doubt. Yeah, you're the second person of the club. But what it does do, and this is always a kind of long-term game, is that so if anybody wanted to write about that, an art critic, they could clearly identify that actually that covers lots of artists who are based in the north of England, who are expressionist painters, who are like Sheila Fell. Yeah. Sheila Fell's an expressionist painter. You know, because it's like raw and it's visceral and it's about the landscape. So she fits into that. So maybe she was the first northern expressionist. You know, but that was so it was really a kind of marketing term to identify anybody who feels or wants to be part of that group, whatever that might be. But really, and this is a discussion.
I can feel an exhibition coming on.
Yeah, well, this is kind of, and I'm sure it's been used before, but it's an idea that a curator could go, okay, that artist, they all kind of come together. They're all saying something about the landscape. You know, it's expressionist painting. It's a feeling, you know, and it's expressed in this particular way, whatever medium it might be, that clearly identifies a group. And in my head, and it's maybe come back to the auction, is that it's a marketing term which can then help other artists move and elevate their work up into more money for their sales. Because the problem that we have as artists living in the north of England is that it's a difficulty getting galleries, getting posh galleries, and you know, my paintings, your paintings round here might be £1,000, £2,000, £3,000, £4,000. In London there'd be 10, 20, 30,000 quid. And that's a difficulty, you know. So why couldn't it, or why shouldn't it be those kind of prices? But it hasn't got a kind of thing to kind of connect it, because it's kind of ephemeral. So what we need as a group of artists is something that pulls us all together, that people can identify with. So if it goes to the auctions, you know, I deliberately did that.
I was going to ask you about. I'll come back to that.
So when the auction, Northern Expressionist painter. So okay, there's a Northern Expressionist. So then somebody else can hang their hat on that. I'm a Northern Expressionist, and then it becomes part of something which is
Northern Expressionist.
Yeah, exactly. Northern Expressionist. So then people can be part of that, and it helps other people to identify that they're part of something that's happening, that's responding to the landscape, and then that helps them in auctions to push up the prices, or it helps them in sales to push up their prices, or to make a living. So it's a deliberate expression that I come up with to help myself and others move their work around.
Great. That's a good idea.
Yeah, that's the idea.
Yeah. So the auction.
Yeah.
So I was going to ask you about that. Yeah, so you recently had an auction at Dougleby's, which is the auction house in Scarborough. Unfortunately, I couldn't make it. I was away, I think. But
you could have put an offering online, you know.
I've already got two of your paintings.
That's true. Yeah, you're a collector, which is great.
And I'm also a starving artist.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. But so I was going to ask you, did you instigate it or did Dougleby?
I instigated it.
You instigated it.
I instigated it.
And so why did you instigate it?
Well, I know David Dougleby, and I've known him for a long time. And it's probably about a year ago, 18 months ago, I was you might have been there actually, some party. Anyway, so he turned up for that. And I was saying, right, David, what about, would you consider my work for an exhibition or for an auction? So, yeah, why not, And they'd never done a living artist before like that.
I was going to say, it's usually for dead people, isn't it?
Yeah, it's usually dead people. And I've been thinking about it for a while. And then, okay, that's interesting. And then I listened to a programme about Swedish death cleaning.
Yeah.
And I thought, it's the idea that you dematerialise in your life before you get old, and then so it isn't a burden on your kids. And then I said to my kids before Christmas last year, I said, what are you going to do with all my work? Well, snuff it, like tumbleweed. And I've got a lot of work. I've got hundreds and hundreds of drawings, hundreds of paintings, stashed all around the house.
Do you have a big house to put it on?
But on top floor, as Louise puts it, full of my crap upstairs, Actually, it's my work, darling, it's my work, But I've got lots of stuff and hundreds of etchings as well, and lots of things that nobody's ever seen, and it's just kind of gathering dust. And I thought, well, why not? Let's see what happens really. And then so I contacted Douglaby's and I said I'm interested in an auction, and then they sent Dominic, who's the auctioneer, the young lad Dominic, to come and look at the work at the studio. And I pulled out about 200 paintings, 200 drawings, and we went through them. He said, yeah, let's do it. And then,
And how did it go?
It went really well. It went well on several levels. So I made enough money to keep painting for another 2 years, which is great.
Right. Oh, well, that's good, isn't it? Yeah.
But interestingly enough, there's lots of things that have happened. They chose paintings that they thought they could sell, which they did. Yeah. But they also chose a lot of paintings which I probably wouldn't have chosen. If it was an exhibition, they probably wouldn't have gone in. Yeah. I would have chosen other works. And also some of my best paintings didn't sell.
Right.
So I was pleased about. So I've still got them. But what's happened since? So a few things have happened. I wanted the catalogue, which is Northern Expressionist. The catalogue's really good. But it also, when the mailing list went out, it went out to 30,000 people.
Wow.
Okay, so that's 30,000 people that didn't know who it was before.
Yeah.
Well, some of them might know. So there's that, and then there was the PR associated with that. Then there was all the marketing associated with that, and then there was the actual auction itself, which I sat in the back room and watched, which was fascinating. There was some people got some bargains.
Were there a lot of people there?
Probably about a dozen people, but a lot of people online.
Right, yeah.
They sell most of their work online these days.
Scarborough's not the best place for selling stuff
generally,
is it?
A lot of people buy stuff
online. But Douglaby's are quite well known now, I suppose. Yeah.
So, quite a few paintings, and there was some sacrificial lambs went. I think, I wouldn't have sold it for that. But I was prepared to take that on the chin. I was prepared to do that, because the way I saw it was, and I met one guy, and then he bought two. And I knew he got a bargain. I knew, but I had to separate myself emotionally from these paintings. I knew that actually they were just get rid of them, because the money from that would give me enough money to paint for another year or more. I've stayed in some really nice hotels recently, by the way. Because I've treated my missus. So that pays for that. My van to get fixed. That's in the garage this morning. It's going to pay for that. Right. So I'm not worried about money for another year or more. So I don't have to worry about that. Which means it's taking the pressure away from me to sell paintings, or so I can do what I want. But the other benefit of that as well, which didn't occur to me, is that the unsold paintings stay online.
Oh right, okay.
And I've sold 6 since then, since the auction.
Okay.
So
and do they go for a specific price, or do they still bid for them?
Right, £500, £800 small paintings.
But was it a fixed price on the?
They're kind of
they still bid for them?
Kind of put an offer in.
Yeah.
And they'll ring me up and say, "What about this?" Oh, it's okay, I'll take that.
Yeah. Oh, great.
And I should admit this, but the reason why some of my prices is like £800 for a small painting, I go, I need a new gearbox. Okay, 800 quid.
I know somebody else that prices things like that. Yeah. What do I need now?
What do I need to get me by?
Gosh.
But the other thing about it as well is the kind of liquidity. So by putting lots of work in your auctions, there's a churn around of your name, and it gets used, it gets people see it, so people are familiar with it, who have not necessarily come across your work before. So that's a benefit. So there are lots of benefits I didn't expect that's come from it, particularly because I'm selling work. It's like having a permanent gallery, effectively, really, and they're kind of an art dealer.
And what percentage do they take?
20%, 25%.
And you don't have to pay to do it or anything?
No, you don't.
You
No,
get
not
the
online.
percentage.
But the
it's
person
quite a cheap gallery then.
It is quite a cheap gallery, but the person buying it has to pay 25% as well.
Right.
So a £3,000 painting is actually 3,600 plus VAT, so it's a £4,000 painting.
God.
So then, and this is the other reason why I've done it, is that I've sold work in galleries before, and it's fine. But if somebody comes to the studio and you say, "Why are you asking £4,000 for that?" Because I think it's worth £4,000. But who says it's worth £4,000? Well, if you go to Douglaby's auction house, you can see that sold for 4,000 quid.
Yeah.
Oh, right. So there's a provenance about it, and that's the other reason I want to do it. There's a provenance about your price. It's gone into an auction. It's got a catalogue. It's got a picture of it, and it's sold for that.
And somebody's willing to pay that
at an auction, knowing full well that that's probably half of what you probably pay for it, or even less. So there's a provenance about that. So eventually, if I move them down to London, prices can move up, and then hopefully,
Would you do them in an auction house in London?
Yeah, because that 3,000 painting up here is probably 25 down there.
Yeah. It's a tricky one, isn't it? The difference in prices.
Oh,
because obviously, if you're in a gallery, you've got to have the same price in every place, really, haven't you?
Yeah. There's a consistency about that. And probably,
at least in an auction, they've got the choice. It could be anything for as long as you've got a reserve.
Well, that's the other thing about it. They said to me, they were managing my expectations before. They said, "Well, Kane, we're not quite sure if we'll sell any of these big ones. They'll either go for lots of money or you won't sell them." And that was true. But since then, I've sold 5.
Wow.
Yeah, so somebody's out there looking for a big space.
So would you do it at Dougleby's again, or would you?
Would they take me again?
Yeah, would they?
Well, I did joke.
Not an annual event.
No, because I haven't got enough stuff. It's all gone. But I think the next one will probably when I snuff it. Then it'll be a posthumous show. Then they might be worth a lot more money.
Christie's. Thank you for listening. This is the end of part 2. Tune in next week for part 3.